too many buyers in the public sector don't understand their empowerment as the buyer.
When the internet started to come into schools, we sort of designed for the floor, not the ceiling. We didn't think through enough what the possible and thoughtful use cases were in a way that the public sector leaders could actually ask more of industry.
All right, y'all, welcome back to another episode of The Effort to Conquer. My name is Jamie Grant, your host. Super excited to have somebody that is a friend with us today that I've been fortunate to get to know over the last few years to really kind of dive into where we both see from our vantage points just the partnership between the buyers, sellers, implementers, what it looks like to really accelerate progress in the public sector. And I couldn't think of somebody more equipped to have that conversation than Rajeev Bajaj. Rajeev is the EVP of Education Solutions at MGT, formerly the CEO of Katamba as part of that group. Rajeev, one, thank you. You're a busy man that's doing work all across the country to transform this stuff. So just taking the time, we really appreciate it.
Jamie, great to be here and excited about the conversation.
Most of our early guests, quite frankly, and it's the same way this came together, it starts at a dinner conversation where we just start jamming out, kind of venting a little bit, aspiring, dreaming, whiteboarding, like that kind of stuff. I think you have so much insight into what go-to-market has historically looked like in the public sector, where people just, quite frankly, I think too many innovators and too much talent looks at the public sector space and says, like, I don't understand it. It's too complicated. I've got value I can offer, but it's this foreign world that I can't get into. And I think you uniquely have a lot to offer there. What would you say to another CEO, like CEO to CEO conversation, if we took somebody that kind of fits in that, like, man, I'd like to be able to help these school districts. They're sitting ducks getting hammered left and right with ransomware attacks. They're dealing with legacy systems. They're kind of being told it's impossible to move forward. You've got a track record of doing exactly that. How would you encourage other people to come to the space, and what would your thought be?
It's a great question, Jamie. I mean, my background, got the education bug almost 30 years ago, kind of left technology and ended up going into the classroom to be a fourth grade teacher in New York City, and then ended up down at the central office and in government in the Bloomberg administration. I think the kind of common thread on this is how can you be a running partner to leaders on solving their biggest problems. And so this sort of partnership posture to me is, starts with, a solution orientation on this front, really being a good listener, being able to you use the term kind of a solution architect on this front. We understand, public sector leaders have a bunch of pressure. They've got external stakeholders, they've got budget pressure, they got the politics, both small p and big P of their jobs. And so trying to understand what their biggest points of pain are, and bringing to them not just kind of a point solution, but rather sort of a broader view of what they're trying to accomplish and, how they're trying to serve their constituents ends up being kind of central to that. And so I think, to your question, it strikes me that success on that is really, digging in, not just on the specific, ransomware or whatever the specific problem is, but actually stepping back with them and saying, all right, how do we solve this problem more systematically for you? And so, in government, you often hear, don't let a good crisis go to waste. And so, we've been able to, and I've been able to, I think, kind of roll up our sleeves with leaders, one by saying, listen, we've been in your chair, we've sat in this chair, and we want to create a systematic solution that solves the specific crisis that you're dealing with, but that helps you modernize your infrastructure in that case, that helps you sort of think more strategically about what you're trying to solve over time, and that ultimately allows you as a public sector leader to keep your promises to your constituents.
So, man, there's a few places I go with that, but one thing I love that I think kind of tethers us into the conversation we both want to have today is I think so many people look at this foreign ecosystem and they say you have to know how it works to win business, or you have to know the certain people to know business, instead of understanding you have to know how to build trust and empathize with the prospect on the other side. Because I don't care where you're selling, the foundation of good sales is like concentrate amounts of empathy and discovery. And I wonder to what extent, because you know, our first intro, I really was impressed that y'all actually do the design and listening work prior to like building and saying, give us a contract and then we'll do it. It's like, time out. Can we level set on what your problems are? And sure, the fact that Rajeev used to operate on the inside gives him a lot of knowledge, and it gives him an ability to kind of do the capital P, lowercase p politics work and poke on. But really, if he just does a good job empathizing, which starts with listening and moves to connecting, you didn't necessarily have to have the experience on the inside to be effective. Or said another way, just because you had experience on the inside does not mean you know how to connect or empathize with people.
That's, I mean, absolutely. I think that's right. And, you know, I left government and started a boutique management consultancy focused on ed policy. And I think that being a good consultant, Jamie, that you're describing, kind of the empathizing and the actually getting to root cause on what problem are we solving here, through asking good questions and listening, really is the core of the work, versus sort of, you know, zooming to this is the answer, or this product's going to solve your problem, or whatever it might be. I think that discovery is really the work, and allows you the ability to kind of co-design what that solution is, because often the person you're talking to actually knows the answer in some form or another. And so that empathizing and listening helps to create that co-design. And I think that really is the magic. And to your point, actually, and we talk about this a lot, you know, MGT, we are a state, local, and education focused advisory and technology firm, with a lot of folks that have come out of the seats we were talking about, similar to you. But going from the buy side to the sell side is actually not a no-brainer, right? I mean, it is, you know, there are a lot of folks that we come across that can't cross that chasm, that aren't able to move from that. And that's not a reflection on their character or anything, but what you're talking about, that sort of ability to empathize and listen, and kind of and be a solution architect in that way, I think is the key to making that transition.
So I've got two questions, and I'm going to go first with the faster one, and then I want to go back to where you just went, because I think it's really, really good stuff. Do you believe, like, if we looked at go to market at the top, and I think when we think sell side and buy side, one of the things that frustrates me in this vertical is it's an adversarial relationship too much, right? Where the sell side has been like told, here's your number, go get the thing, get the meeting, drive it forward. And it's kind of an adversarial or conquering type dynamic rather than a true partnership, where I don't think the buy side and the sell side have to truly be adversarial. I actually think we as citizens and taxpayers need the buy side and the sell side to be in partnership mindset, understand the pain points, the problems, whether or not there's a fit, such that the sell side goes, there's a difference between no and not yet. The buy side says, I understand what I actually need, and now I can scope out kind of what I need so I get clarity. And when I go to market and say, this is what I need, I can pick the right vendor. Do you believe So that's the setup. Do you believe that the current kind of structure, I think of it as like hero selling of an account executive that we see a lot of, versus a team-based model? Do you think that the hero selling individual contributor model is even viable in the public sector, or do you think that it demands a team-based approach, and why?
I think the hero ball sort of relationship based selling model, from my perspective, relationships matter, of course. There's no question. But I think to actually get to what you're talking about, Jamie, in terms of a partner dynamic, you need I do think you need a team-based approach. And I think what that blends is strong relationship, trust, and empathy with some ability to bring content specific support to bear in the education construct. You've got to be able to understand what's top of the priority list for a K-12 superintendent, and that is in every conversation I have is student success and well-being. How are we going to support the kids that show up every day in our public schools to be able to meet their potential, and to provide the resources and support to educators and kids in a holistic way. And so to me, the relationship stuff is necessary but not sufficient to actually get to the partner model and to break through this sort of, oh, this is a vendor conversation, right? And so a lot of the time, I would say, whether you call it an account executive, whether it's a more public sector sort of management consulting, sort of partner level sales discussion, I see myself, frankly, as a client advocate. I am trying to be the honest broker. Ideally, that I have some of those solutions that the client may need, but I often see myself as the client advocate. What is the problem we're trying to solve? What is the solution set, or the sort of co-created solution we're aiming towards? And frankly, often, what is the kind of best of breed answer to that? Hopefully that has some MGT components to it, or a set of things that I do. But that may be broader. And so that also shows, and I think builds trust, where it's not all answers just end up in one lane. And so I think you can kind of act into that client advocate and trust building by doing that co-design and coming up with an answer that, yeah, sometimes has part of your solution set in it, but actually sort of widens the aperture. And you build trust by doing that, frankly, and it ends up being good for the client. It ends up being good for you as a person trying to sell a solution, and you're building the field, because ultimately, to your point, you want a educated and thoughtful buyer that's actually going to build the field here in a way that moves public sector forward. I think about this. We've been doing a lot of work around building the capacity of and building out the capacity of K-12 leaders on being systems leaders on AI. And one of the topics that some of our leaders have talked to us about is, we kind of a bit missed the moment with the internet. When the internet started to come into schools, we sort of designed for the floor, not the ceiling. And by that, I mean, it was a little bit, all right, yes, we need guardrails. We need to design for safety and privacy and security. But we didn't envision and think through enough what the possible and thoughtful use cases were in a way that the public sector leaders could actually ask more of industry. And so when I think about where we are now with AI, I want public sector leaders I work with to be demanding of big tech a set of solutions, rather than a public sector rep from the big tech companies saying, hey, all your answers on AI or Azure or are this or whatever it might be, or OpenAI or whatever the solution might be. Not picking on those guys, but sort of making a point.
Yeah, I think to your point, that's a really good point, is too many buyers in the public sector don't understand their empowerment as the buyer.
Exactly.
right? Like if you really strip it down, I had the ability as a CIO with a $115 billion enterprise and all the things we were doing. Like I actually had the leverage as long as I was willing to use it.
Exactly.
And say, guys, clearly stated, here are the pain points. One of the things I would tell vendors a lot when they would come in is like, I need you to be greedy, but I need your greed pointed exactly at my need.
Absolutely.
So if you are pointed acutely at my pain point, then we maybe don't have to have the adversarial relationship between your P&L on the sell side and my operational needs on the buy side. That Venn diagram became one circle, and we could attack it together on behalf of the citizens of Florida and make a difference. I need you to be really greedy at that. I just can't have you be greedy at something that's not my need.
Absolutely.
And then it's my job to make sure I'm buying well to go, hey, you can be greedy, but I still have to be a steward of the taxpayer dollar.
100%. And I mean, I'm seeing this over and over with, kind of ed tech use cases living outside of the actual problems that leaders of school systems and educators are trying to solve. They're all sort of dreaming up, and I think big tech's doing this too. They're dreaming up the use cases without asking the buyer, what problem are you solving? What are we trying to maximize, teacher time and well-being? And that's what we're trying to solve so that, teachers can unlock their magic and not be spending the night before, having to dream up a lesson plan, and AI can help on that. But what happens too much is that's off in another domain, and we're not doing what we talked about on the front end of this, which is good listening, understanding the problem that we're trying to solve, and being good listeners to public sector leaders, educators in this case, around what are their biggest pain points, and what are they trying to make progress on.
Which I think is ironic when we talk about any tech, but obviously big tech that has scaled, right? You became big tech because you scaled. I don't think anybody could name, in order for them to become big tech, they had to find product market fit. Right. In order to find product market fit, they had to have really good feedback loops. But these are companies that are used to those feedback loops being like binary or input output or data driven, that says when we do this, this happens. Facebook is the easy kind of layup example of N of 7. Once you had 7 friends on Facebook, they knew they had you as a user. They didn't have to actually go talk to people to do that. They could let the machines tell them that.
Yep.
And so I think there's this fantastic irony where all of definitely the big tech, wherever that line starts, stops, whatever that is, they've all scaled internationally. They've all gone into foreign ecosystems. They've all listened to the feedback loops. And then somehow the very same companies that were absolutely elite on the customer experience and design and transforming the way software got developed and deployed, to your very point, which I think is not to be lost here, they're getting no feedback from their customer here.
Yeah. Yeah.
None. And it was remarkable to me how many times you can imagine. There were plenty of times where I would talk to an AE, an account executive, a sales engineer, a BU lead, whatever it was. And they're like, sorry, we can't do that. And I said, well, I'm happy to send an email to your, VP of the public sector, your CEO. You tell me who it goes to. I would like your thing. I cannot have your thing if it does not comply with these things.
Yeah.
And so no matter how many times you come and meet with me, and then lo and behold, when the conversation actually happened executive to executive, their thing now did the thing I needed it to do.
Right.
Or there was clarity and they said, hey, we just can't. And I said, well, hey, sorry, but happy to, continue conversations on other things where your greed aligns to my need.
Yeah. No, I think this is it's such a powerful point. And particularly in this moment where there's so much, I don't know, when you zoom out, the sort of connection between the public and private sector and how that collaboration works speaks to, frankly, how we're renegotiating the social contract. At least in the United States, it's front and center on this front. And so this ability to transcend and actually collaborate and create spaces where there is actual deep listening and feedback loops, and frankly, co-solutioning on this front, where the public sector is being asset based and the private sector is being asset based around what are we trying to solve, I think is a real opportunity. I think that the challenge is that everybody, to your point, ends up a little bit with whatever their main incentive, the immediate point of pain on the public sector side, what the AE is being tasked with to generate X level of revenue, you end up kind of defaulting to those, sometimes not aligned first principles on both sides. And so aspirationally, people agree on this, but there's no middle space to actually do what we're talking about, because, the public sector's got their immediate priority they need. The private sector is talking about, quarterly results, and I've got, 28 days left in the quarter to get to my number or whatever it might be, right? So that said, I do think there's an opportunity there. And I think that middle space feels very high potential to me if we could kind of, lower the temperature on both sides of that to actually get to the solution space. I actually think we could create some really unique solutions that meet the challenges, as I think about, my clients on the public sector side, and what ultimately, in the case we're talking about, what big tech's trying to accomplish actually in servicing better and actually getting to some of the end goals we're talking about, where technology can really be an enabler.
I think you just beautifully described these tensions that sometimes complement and sometimes conflict.
Yeah.
So I think everybody stipulates, I've said for a long time, Anish Chopra and I used to joke about it when I was still in the legislature and he was the CTO, that, Anish and I don't agree on a lot politically. If he's a governor, I'm a governor, we're in the Senate or the House, our voting record's not going to look very similar. But there's going to be this Venn diagram that I think when you talk about the citizen, the contract and the compact with our citizens, and we've seen it this year play out, where by and large, everybody agrees with efficiency. There's always going to be the political chatter of whether red's doing it, blue's doing it, do I like it because of who's doing it. And Anish and I would talk a lot that like the digital transformation and data should be kind of the white of the red, white, and blue. Like this should be an area that we all agree student outcomes should get better, patient outcomes should get better, our best teachers should be rewarded. Like these are things that the dinner room table across America says, I don't disagree with that objective. But when we start getting into the how, we start to get these tensions. So I think you touched on a few things, Rajeev. One is, we all agree government is going to have a really hard time recruiting, developing, and then subsequently retaining the talent to like build in a CapEx model these solutions. I don't know any of us that think government dev is the path forward. Simultaneously, outsourcing to people who don't understand the ecosystem is also going to be a flaw. And so there's all of those things that are like these truths that kind of arrive at the only one solution being what you just laid out, solution fit. And being able to say like, hey guys, we understand your problem. Here are some ways to solve it. I think that's the only fit. And I'm curious if you have any examples, because you touched on, I think really well, hey, look, we're going to come and solve problems. Hopefully there's some revenue for our company. We're not a charity and we got to make payroll.
Yeah.
Jay, one of our co-founders that leads all our pipeline and partnerships, is really big on this in working with AEs to say, hey, sometimes the fastest way to build trust with a prospect is to say, we don't do that, but we know the people who do it best and we'd love to solve that problem for you.
Yep.
Happy to make an intro. There's nothing in it for us.
Yep.
Nothing
Absolutely.
builds prospect trust faster than we
100%.
hear your problem.
Absolutely.
We make no money, but this is who does it better than anybody.
Be a resource. Be a resource. I mean, I think that's right. I think on your question, Jamie, of sort of examples, I think we are seeing some interesting potential proof points of collaboration between public and private sector, where we're standing up effectively public infrastructure or public digital infrastructure that is a little bit, I think, if you look at I don't know, I think about in the energy sector, the ESOP stuff, where it's sort of like, you know, I'm gonna fix your windows in a public building and figure out the capital structure for energy efficiency in a way that helps you light and heat the building, the 100-year-old building better, that gets the investor paid, and that, you know, and that builds some utility in some form, kind of the traditional public-private partnership stuff, whether you're leasing back the toll road or whatever the thing might be. I think there's some interesting, some sort of things, some analogs there that might be interesting as we think about, you know, some of the white space you're talking about from your conversations with Anish and others. So, you know, where we can co-design a solution that has effectively some open source components that then we can customize in different ways. I think there is some value there, especially as we think about policy goals of getting more kids into better schools or getting to those health outcomes. I almost feel like we are almost at the place where we are starting to see, forgive the bad analogy, the building of a little bit of TCP/IP for those types of public, for those types of public infrastructure opportunities. And, you know, a couple examples I think about that you know, the school choice movement in the country has sort of taken its next phase. You know, we have public school districts. We had the public charter school movement. We're now headed to a space where we have education savings accounts that are putting dollars in the hands of families. And as someone who's sort of grown up in public school and the public school world, I am very focused on this idea of, yes, I want families to have choice, but I also want them to have quality, right? Both those things need to be true. And so how do we set up the right sets of that social contract, the guardrails, in a way that allow for choice and quality, in a way that makes sense? And I think the sort of connection of some of the transactional platforms that exist for giving families those dollars and having more flexibility in something in a 529, along with then the supply side of this. What are the actual things that take some of the innovation, frankly, of the COVID era around a micro school or homeschool in a box or other things sort of blend with not necessarily the regulatory regimes of the past, but that take the best of what we cared about there, which is, you know, we want to make sure that that learning opportunities are actually leading to outcomes for kids and their well-being. I mean, we look at the data, the student achievement data out of COVID, and our kids are not all right. And so there is some set of you know, small a and big A accountability that needs to be a part of the taxpayer dollars that are going to a public good like education. So I think we're going to see, and I am hopeful we're going to see more innovation on that front, where in some ways I would love to see open source infrastructure then that states could take advantage of to build out what that looks like in Iowa, what that looks like in Indiana, how that plays out in California, in a way that maximizes that student outcome goal with that innovation and flexibility.
Man, I love where you're going. Gosh, there's so much good stuff there, Rajeev. One, I think I want to start here for a second. You used the term first principles a few minutes ago. And we spend a lot of time talking as a team, not a lot of time, but a lot of times this comes up. And I really had to, it struck me when I took the CIO job that your traditional government employee, because there's not a P&L, because there's not earnings per share, because there's not the need to make payroll, all of those things that kind of force it in the commercial sector, I was blown away at how much first principle was synonymous with only principle. Like there was no question of second, third, fourth order principle. It was really point solution on problem, pun intended, in that I have problem, give me point solution. No question of what is the second order of second, third, fourth order effect. Do you agree that the public sector is uniquely, historically, kind of first order means only order. And we've kind of historically made decisions on first order being only order and not maybe thinking through second, third, fourth order effects as a norm. There are plenty of examples where it happens with great leadership, but the ecosystem and the incentive structure of the public sector seemingly incentivizes first order principle being the only consideration, and then move on to the next problem with first order principle instead of mapping and actually thinking second, third, fourth order.
Yeah, I think it's a fair characterization. I do think, we were talking about hero ball on the AE side. I think where I grew up in an era where great leadership, and I think that, that's not just an era. That is, to me, an essential truth. Great leadership makes a difference here. And I've had the great, I'm deeply grateful and, had the privilege of working for great public sector leaders. And so I think that leadership question really drives exactly what you're talking about, which allows for a sort of broader theory of action and alignment to outcome versus sort of the point solution thinking in that way. And I think in some ways we are, again, not to zoom out too far, but I feel like we're in an interesting moment where we have, I think I grew up in an era where the technocratic view was very, even on policy, the technocratic view was, if we move from a compliance-based bureaucracy to a performance-based bureaucracy, we are going to solve all the problems. And I think we were a little bit naive that only that was going to do, was going to meet the mark. And so I think we've in some ways moved beyond that just technocratic view. And in the end, I think it's a balance of the technocratic solution with an alignment to first principles and deep engagement with the citizens, the students, the leaders, the community we are aiming to serve. And that's that's the uniquely American experiment. And I also think is sort of what we have to get right as we think about blending public and private sector, thinking about this in a way that's not, if I build it, they will come, versus, also, there's some Steve Jobs, view around, the customer doesn't really know what they want. How do we blend those things in a way that actually meets, citizen student need at scale?
We used to talk about it when in the electoral construct, recruiting candidates or supporting candidates, we would talk about floors and ceilings. So if we were looking at a race and saying, hey, who do we think is going to win this race? We really wanted to find candidates with high floors and no ceilings, right? High floors and high ceilings, because a low floor is a challenge, right? Yeah. And a low ceiling is a challenge. And so you would find some situations where somebody had a high floor and a low ceiling. You could spend $1 million on their campaign and they were not going to exceed that ceiling because it was there. And then in some situations, even with a really low floor, you could invest that $1 million, but because there was no ceiling, you could get there. I like where you went on I think that, gosh, we could jam out on the choice thing for a long time, both policy and operation. But I think the predicate question there is, because the ecosystem isn't really understood, and because too much of the sell side takes the me point solution closed ecosystem approach, there's no resource sharing. There's no expansion beyond kind of the closed architecture, whether that means technically or just operationally, such that there is no scaling of benefit or reduction in the cost of services provided, the cost of goods sold. It's kind of, I would liken it to what I call the traditional SI boondoggle, where in some situations, the same SI is going to every state building the same exact custom application with 80% exact code, but charging that next jurisdiction 100% of work they already did. And then we're sitting back looking, going, why do we spend more per student and have some of the outcomes, it's not often ever, rarely ever, a resource problem. It's an allocation and alignment problem. And I love where you're going on the open source piece, because that is the roadmap to how we align resources to outcomes, regardless of whether it's a traditional public school or a charter or homeschool in a box or any of those things. We start to scale in ways that I don't know we ever have.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think absolutely. And I mean, I think I think I understand the private sector's incentive to benefit from the fragmentation.
For sure.
That you're talking about.
You can add a whole zero. You can add a zero.
You can add a zero. Right. Exactly. I mean, but go back to the public sector side of that, which to me then is public sector leadership, thinking about what those opportunities are in a way that actually allows for learning from others, benefits of scale, thinking about some of this. I mean, we've looked at, there's been initiatives, everything from outcomes-based contracting to co-sourcing with different states and other things that think about these sort of things. But to your point, about first, second, third order stuff, because there's such pressure around, problem solution, it's often hard to sort of, zoom out with a wider aperture around some of this, even where you have leadership and that alignment, because, there's a resource constraint, there's a political calendar, there's, constituents that need to be served right now around those different things. So I think the alignment broadly of incentives around this, I think is hard. And so that's where I do think we've got to transcend just the hero leadership moments to try to build this sort of broader ecosystem approach. That I think is our best chance at this. And that requires a mix of catching the lightning in the bottle in the leadership moment, in a way that does that, and then showing what's possible here, right? Which is how do we do this in a few places with some proof points where this comes together, and then work to scale those opportunities. And I think there's an opportunity, like I was giving you the K-12 example around. I would love K-12 leaders to really lead on what they're demanding from the private sector on these various fronts, which is it's being a good consumer, but it's actually saying, here are the use cases. Here's what I need from you. Don't just go off and spend $1 billion on what you think the LLM should be. Let's actually engage in a way where this is mutually beneficial. And so I think there are many, many examples on that front of where we could do that. And so to me, I think it's incumbent upon us, on whatever side you're on, to try to find where that middle space is to try to solve some of these problems. And I think we can do it.
I think we can, and I think you teed up kind of something we're going to tease at the end on just some community building that doesn't make either of us any money, but is kind of on the roadmap to that. It just hit me, Rajeev, as you were talking, that the hero leader on the technology side, on the buyer side, the hero ball on that side, I see a lot of times beat their chest and go, I am the state of, or I'm the agency of, and and in reality, their adoption is really like small mid-market size to the companies.
Sure. Yeah.
In reality, maybe at an extremely high level, if we went really high here, I don't think you can find many technology companies that operate in the commercial and the public sector space who generate more than 10% of their total revenue from the public sector.
Sure.
So now if we come back to like that, I think kind of maybe, let's say, hero buyer that perhaps lacks some self-awareness and economics to back their position, that kind of beats their chest and says, I am, you shall. I think that's one of the problems. On the other side, you find that humble, mission-driven leader of maybe a smaller organization or similarly situated that kind of understands those things and feels like they're on an island and they go, well, gosh, if I go to this company that does, 3% of their total revenue in the public sector and I say I need this thing, I don't really know if I can make a difference. And they're probably right. But sitting in between that is that community of excellence you're describing, where 100 buyers orchestrated, clearly communicating, that does get the attention of the sell side. That is way more than just noise and becomes signal. And that does, I think, start to invite the sell side to the table to go, whoa, I got 100 school districts here wanting to have a conversation about what the LLM looks like in K-12 in America over the next decade.
Yeah.
That has them running to the table, where those other two situations, I think, kind of go nowhere in a way that I think is one of the most foundational elements to drive the progress you're describing. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it just struck me that the extreme on both sides of the buyer's behavior that either is self-aware and knows they can't really be a hero, or doesn't understand they can't be a hero but pretends like a hero, is holding us way back.
I think you're spot on. I think, she or he, hero, heroine, leader on the public sector side kind of default to that because, the public sector leader is not making what the private sector leader is making. They want to, they obviously care about the mission, etc. But that's one of the inputs in terms of, being known in the field, etc. Wanting to lead on that front and make a difference. There's been good. Some people do a tour in public and then go back to private. There's more malleability on the talent side on this front. I think we've, done a reasonable job over the last 20 years around getting folks, someone like, you or others that have spent time in the public sector and the private sector, and you can navigate both. And I think we need to recognize that acknowledgement on the public sector side is something that is an incentive in a different way. And I think one tool in the toolkit. So I think this middle space you're talking about can actually be part of a bigger tent around a set of public sector leaders and private sector leaders working to solve those problems that they can all talk about, right? To both their core constituents, to sort of say, hey, we're leading on this front. This is something that's great. Here's a proof point on that front. It's having outcomes. It matches that need. So I think what we're talking about in terms of that community is ripe to be developed. And I think I would love to see that space, because I think we can give everybody what they want, if that makes sense. Both as it relates on the public sector side and the private sector side, we can meet that need, because we all want to make a difference. We all want to do a good job. There are some very basic human truths here that we can maximize in service of all the goals and ultimately what we're trying to accomplish.
Rajeev, you could not have set up something that I wanted to go back to at the top and was trying to figure out how to keep it in the conversation, because I think it's important, and I couldn't have paid you to come back to it better with what you just said. So you mentioned earlier that you've had a lot of experience, both as the CEO of Katamba and now at MGT leading the ed practice, with people that came from the inside, maybe having a challenge on the outside in flipping roles. And I couldn't agree more. One of the things that I really got annoyed with as a buyer was the way that the term field CIO kind of got operationalized or bastardized. And what I mean by that is I would have somebody that was wearing the shirt of the company that had hired him as a field CIO. They would come in and they would all almost say the exact same thing. Hey, I'm not on a quota. I don't have a commission. I'm just an advisor. And in my head, I'm thinking, Cupcake, you're on a P&L whether you know it or not. So if you think that, I hope you don't believe what you just said, number one, for your family's sake and your revenue for the family, your income. But two, if you think I'm going to buy because you bought, right? Like if that person that came from the inside, if all they have is I have some relationships and I bought your product so I can be a spokesperson, My theory is that, and I've talked to some companies, maximum lifetime profit on that is 2-3 years. Like at the end of year 2 or 3, the P&L catches up and it's like, hey, if you were only here for the relationships and for I bought, so you should buy, it's not going to work. On the flip side, I think that those people from the inside, so the question is like, do you know people or do you know design process? Do you know product or do you know how to do discovery?
Yes.
Do you know who people are on an org chart, or do you know how to connect with anybody on any org chart in such a way? So I don't want to pick on that crowd, because I think where I would really pick is the companies unlike the companies who have leaders unlike you that go, they were on the inside, therefore they don't know how to situate them for success and go, hey, your experience on the inside, really relevant. Now I need to kind of coach you, teach you on this foreign ecosystem over here called the private sector. Because honestly, Rajeev, like when people ask me, how did you figure that out in that room on the fly and whatnot? It's like, they're like, man, being the CIO of Florida must have really equipped you. And it's like, honestly, all that being the CIO of Florida did was show me all the dumpster fires and the problems that needed to be solved. But the approach of transforming the partnership and go-to-market is 100% my private sector background and what I spent a long time doing before I ever did 3 very hellacious years in government. And so I say that to ask, if you were, I want to do this 2 ways, 2 different questions. So first question, if you're talking to somebody that's listening to this, who's on the inside, they have no private sector experience, and I'll tell you, there is nothing that I've seen yet to equip and support the offboarding of somebody from the public sector to the private sector. They don't know what an RSU is. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't know what's fair. They don't know how to identify what a private sector org situated for success looks like. If you were to give them your kind of quick 2-3 minute, go on a rant here, because I do think so many great public sector employees that are going to make this transition are basically asked to do it blindly with no experience and no support. And so they're just kind of blindfolded, throwing darts at a board going, what company am I going to land at? Rather than what are the things I should be looking at in that organization to feel comfortable that that organization actually gets it and is going to equip me for success when I make the move to the private sector?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I mean, I think a couple things. One is, I think folks generally that are making this move over-index on their subject matter expertise, like you're saying.
Click on
Jamie.
that. Click on that.
And I think it's sort of like, I did this thing in government for 20 years, for 10 years, for whatever number of years. And that's my calling card. And I think, again, necessary but not sufficient in that transition. The subject matter expertise, obviously critical.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Would you agree?
Yeah.
You said necessary, not sufficient, total agreement. I would even go so far as to say disqualifying if it's the only thing.
If it's the right, well, that's what I was going to say is, and so then I think, I go back, I built a consulting business, so I have a little bit of a lens there around the ability to go back to trust building, to empathic listening, to discovery. And I think what I have seen for folks that are successful, whether it's making that transition well or being a good AE, is I often call this just intellectual curiosity. Actually a desire to want to understand the problem that the person you're talking to is trying to solve, versus this problem solution mindset that you just described, which is like, all roads lead to a Microsoft Office license, right? And I say this, I'm picking on my old employer. I used to work, I worked at Microsoft out of undergrad, but sort of all roads leading to that answer is not the way to make that transition. And so the ability to listen, to ask good questions, to be a good consultant in that way, and then to co-design what a solution or an architecture for a solution might look like, I think is the path to success. I do a lot of what I call sort of apprenticeship model on client engagement, on discovery. I invite anybody in my organization that wants to join a first call with a superintendent or a deputy superintendent, join me for the call. Just, and again, I'm not saying I'm magical or, or am expert in anything, but just to learn those sorts of reps about how to have a conversation, and do discovery, I think are really the sets of reps I want to create in my organization, for folks that will be good consultants, that will be good sellers, that will be good deliverers of ultimately the solutions we're trying to enable in the public sector.
Do you feel like you're being selfish when you do that? Because I do, and here's why. When I do the apprenticeship model, it gives my team reps. That is true.
Yep.
It also makes me so much better. And I think people miss this all the time, because I will never be as good at a curious and calm discovery process as my co-founder, Jay, ever. I could work on it forever and I will never be as calm and curious.
Yep.
And so at the same time, Jay came to us, and when we were recruiting him, I said, hey, he was a COVID riff at a commercial SaaS company, and he called me kind of in a mentor construct to say, hey, I'm looking for what's next. And he kind of described what's next. I'm like, why don't you just come do that with us? And he goes, I don't know anything about the public sector. And I said, good. 95% of people in it don't either. You'll be just fine. But when I have him on discovery calls, or Paige on some of the process and product stuff, they are constantly poking holes, finding gaps that give me the opportunity to go, like, guys, I busted that assignment. My bad. Yeah. And so I think you're spot on that it gives them reps, but I don't understand why. Yes, I don't understand why more leaders don't do it.
Amen. I completely. And by the way, I think, I am at my core, a policy geek that wants to keep solving problems. And so to your point, there's a selfishness around being able to be in those conversations and to be valuable and to keep current on what people care about, and having that customer feedback loop is, deep dopamine hit, right? So, totally with you.
I would even go back to kind of the transitioning out. Like, nobody gives a rip that I was the state CIO of Florida. Nobody cares what we did. Now, there might be some certain moments where it establishes some credibility in an empathic session to look at somebody else in the chair and go, I've been through 3 years of hell in the worst operational environment I've ever seen. If you like, there's some connection to that.
Yeah.
But if you think, or anybody thinks, I can walk in a room and go, oh, I was CIO of Florida. We had the second largest Starlink deployment, fastest ever ServiceNow stand-up in ServiceNow history. We did this, and this, whole estate cyber, all these things. I'm like literally just reading my highlight film to somebody who's playing the game themselves. And all I'm actually doing is reducing trust and credibility if I'm walking in a room saying, let me show you my highlight film, rather than just saying, hey, look, we can level set. We've both been in the locker room. We've both played the game. I get it. Now let's have an actual conversation and connect.
And I think to your point, it accelerates the trust building, but still then, you can get faster to a real conversation that you don't have to do the bridging of the translation and all that. And I think you're right. That's actually, that's exactly what it does.
You can go warp speed to the cliff. You can go warp speed to the cliff, but it is still a cliff if you cannot do the design and discovery and connection work at that point.
Absolutely. And this is to the point about moving from the buy side to the sell side. Sometimes this is why it fails, because the highlight reel is almost a turnoff for folks that are in that chair. I don't want to hear what that guy or gal did, when they were superintendent or whatever. Like, I got my own problems, and yes, it's helpful, and there's some empathy there, but don't overplay the hand on that.
That and 100%. And like, I joke with people sometimes. They're like, hey, can you help me with this agency in Florida, whatnot? And I always laugh. I'm like, guys, you need to understand, I have a lot of friends in Florida, a lot. you don't make the kind of progress we made that fast without making some enemies. Question one, should I be in the room or not, right? Like there are some agency CIOs who are not going to send me a Christmas card because we had to call a spade a spade. And if we're just going to jump to, like, I kind of laugh in that field CIO role, like it's like, here's the shiny little object. And it's like, nobody cares, guys. Like if we can do the credibility thing, I want to give the flip side real quick, and then we'll land with kind of the AI convening and frontier state stuff, because I think it'd be good to touch on real quick and then have some fun on what we call the Roundup. Give people a chance to know Rajeev. I want to go full circle and kind of land our conversation with we just talked about like the buy side transitioning to the sell side. But going back to the top of like the AE hero ball selling, I think a lot of that's structural. And I've been blown away with, 500, 1,000 different AE pitches, planning sessions across a number of companies and across the country. I like to say we finally, Jay and I both got, and Paige, but Jay and I had come out of just a terrible experience that was embarrassing, mortifying that we were even involved. And we finally were like, how do we get these people to understand like meeting one is not demo and deck? And we finally started saying that the only time demo or deck should come before discovery is in the dictionary. Stop. What would you coach the AE or the CEO? Let's start there. If team-based is the model, if everything you've laid out is how to do go-to-market, if we do believe that this should be a symbiotic and partner relationship that is a compact on behalf of the taxpayer, we've talked about kind of the buy-side person coming over and being able to get to discovery faster, which is a part of this. Like, let's accelerate the solution side. Yeah. But that can't accelerate if I don't also have the industry side pulling its head out of its backside sometimes and saying, wait a minute, I can't hero sell AE, crack the whip on get meetings. What would be your kind of elevator pitch to those folks?
Yeah. Great question. I feel like for the AE and the team-based selling side of this, to me, the punchline is I do think having sort of a point person on the AE side that actually thinks of themselves as chief of discovery and sort of overall sort of builder of context in a, take the state of Florida, take a big school district, whatever it might be, that is literally tasked with that, we call it a diagnostic in consulting world, is actually thinking through the overall theory of the case on this front in a way that those of us that are busy or are thinking about one problem or whatever it might be actually have that full view. And they own that discovery and diagnostic. And again, bring the empathy, the trust, and the curiosity to that exercise. I actually think that can be really, really valuable. And so that's what we're testing. We're doing a little bit of a, multiple pathways strategy. We have sort of partner level management consulting sales. We have an AE structure. We have a business development manager and a transactional structure. We have RFP and RFX. We're doing it all. And I think for me, the AE part of this as sort of the chief holder of the diagnostic, which read that strategic plan, bring in the board minutes, think about all those things, and then be a really thoughtful consultant on that diagnostic or that discovery process. I think there's value in that. I actually think, particularly then, if you can bridge that to being the sort of point person as the solution architect as well, which is, to me, there is value in that coherence and that sense making. I actually think there's a ton of value there. And so that would be my punchline for AE-based view on this is be that solution architect. Think about it that way. Bring in detailed expertise when you need the person that's, 2 levels deep on subject matter expertise in the organization on privacy or security or whatever that is, or on academics or instruction or facilities or whatever the case might be. Be the chief orchestrator, but live in that solutions oriented posture as that convener and choreographer of all of that.
Chief of Discovery is that's a banger. I say that if I ran public sector for sales in general, but like we've actually kind of developed some criteria to say meeting number one as the AE, you're allowed to tell them who you are, what we do in one sentence or less, and you're allowed to tell them what we're hoping to accomplish. You are not allowed to tell them about how we do anything. And meeting number one is exclusively to identify pain points and figure out. Meeting number two is exclusively benefit, no price allowed. And then number three, once we've had some solution discovering, if we want to start talking about where benefit and price comes together. But we find because there's no discovery, meeting one, we say the self-fulfilling prophecy of one meeting. The AE works so hard to get the meeting, and then they finally get it, and it's that scene from Tommy Boy where he just shakes the muffin to death, and it's like, I love it, and I pet it. And so
all about ball bearings. Yeah.
It's all a Fletch and Tommy Boy reference on the Ever to Conquer is boy. So, all right. I love where you went with Chief of Discovery. I think you're spot on. I would tell you it's not just a think there's value. I think you're going to see real pipelines and growth happen where the partnership happens, and it can't happen without the ingredients you've laid out today.
And we as organizational leaders need to build the muscle of folks that are coming into these roles to be able to do that discovery. So, I had the benefit of running an advisory business that aims to build the best consultants doing the thing we're doing. And so I want my AEs in that onboarding. I want them literally learning those things. And then the apprenticeship model is a part of it. Again, it's sort of a mix of things in this cocktail to build this this sort of chief of discovery function.
100%. And something that I know our good friend Trey Treviesa would appreciate on this front. What just hit me as you were talking is we spend a lot of time, I say over and over and over, customer acquisition cost in the public sector will never catch up to commercial. It's impossible for a lot of reasons. We could do a whole episode on that. However, lifetime value of a customer in the commercial sector will never catch up to the public sector. And so to your point, when we don't do the discovery, when we do the point solution, when we focus on the P&L and the transaction, we are taking away our greatest asset that would actually align, because whether it's a private equity firm, a venture-backed company, or just a CEO looking at it, if I'm doing business with government, I should have realistic expectations of customer acquisition cost, and I have to throw out the contrast to the commercial market other than to baseline how I'm doing in the public sector. But I should be leaning all into the greatest strength of the financials in the public sector, that lifetime value is unmatched compared to the commercial markets.
I mean, that's so well said, Jimmy. I mean, I've never articulated it that way. And I think, when you think about the gives and gets, that may mean that in building those relationships, your gives to start significantly outweigh your gets, right? This diagnostic, this solution architecture, like, we should just do that for the good of the order because it's good for the client. And to this point, like, it may be us and maybe somebody else. Let's help you understand what problem you're solving. Let's help you design the best solution for that. And then I think the commercial benefits come with that over time. Like that's not, I mean, I have found that over and over again, that if you do the right thing by your potential client, you're a resource for them. Not only are you building trust, that is to me the pathway to then commercial benefit as well. So that, at least in my view, has served me and us well in how we think about, doing this work.
All right. So to tee you up to talk about AI convening and for us to talk about Frontier State for a minute or two and then jumping into the roundup, I'm laughing. We did not coordinate this piece at all. But as you were talking about it, one of the things we tell teams or friends in the space is adopt a 3-give framework. You are not allowed to ask for anything until you have given 3 unique elements of give. And in some ways, this industry, this vertical just needs to be taught that it's not transactions, it's not mercenary, and you are not allowed to ask for a meeting. You are not allowed to ask for a demo. You cannot ask for anything until you've given 3 unique units of give. And then on the buy side, do not respond if they immediately make the ask. And it's a great example of where, like, Mandy Crawford talked a lot when I was on the inside, she still does, about partnership, not vendor. That's a great example of where, like, they can both align. 3 gives, then maybe ask for a meeting. Fine. And if they say no, 3 more gives. That will bear fruit.
And 100%. And I mean, listen, we're not the first folks to talk about shifting from vendor to partner.
No, but how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody talks about that, and yet their behaviors don't match that. And to me, this is the showing, not telling on this front. Anybody can say it. It's a lot harder than to actually do what you're saying. The 3 gifts, the be a resource to folks. Maybe it's not you. Connect them to somebody that's valuable to them. Make it, invest in building that relationship and trust. And, I see myself as someone who's not leaving the public education space. This is my career. I'm a member of this ecosystem. I'm not just trying to sell you something. I'm going to be here for the rest of my career. And so it's good for them. It's good for the field. And, yes, it'll be beneficial to you at some point. Don't be transactional about it.
I'm dying laughing. I'm going to get in trouble for this one, but I couldn't tell if you were describing dating in 2025 with anybody can say they want a healthy relationship, but their behavior may not show the same.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there you go.
But they're the same, right? Like, healthy relationships are healthy relationships, whether it's romantic, a friendship, or professional. So, man, all right. I want you to give a quick intro to the AI convening, because I think the work you're doing there is really cool. And then I think maybe just to tee it up, the partnership collaboration around the nonprofit work we're both doing to try and bring decision makers, mission-driven folks together, really to create rooms where this kind of solution stuff happens. No sales allowed, no pitches allowed, no pressure allowed with a zero strike policy, but to say, how do we bring together the buy-side folks that you're describing and a lot of the great work y'all do and we do with buy-side organizations around the country, to say who's really mission-driven and who's serious, their actions back up that they're mission-driven, and then where are some people that are serious about being partners. So I think the AI convening is a great example, but kind of excited to announce what we're working on with Frontier State as well.
Absolutely. Headlines here, we at MGT work state, local, and education, and I particularly lead our education vertical, and we continue to hear from our education clients who are superintendents, big philanthropic partners in education, about a need to engage and support the systems that these education leaders work in on AI, what the promise and the peril that exists on this topic looks like. And so over the course of the past year, we have starting with the convening of systems leaders, think superintendents of systems, state education chiefs, some of the partners in technology and other ecosystem players, basically brought together education leaders around kind of what's going on in AI in education. And what sort of came out of that conversation was, this is a group that needs a community. They want to engage with each other. They want to understand what the opportunities are, both from a safety, security, policy perspective, but also your ceiling and floor concept. What's the ceiling on the use cases for teaching and learning, for these operational benefits that might exist on AI? And so we launched about 6 months ago an AI learning collective, a set of education leaders, superintendents, their CIOs of large school districts, and actually both large, urban, rural, with geographic diversity, almost 20 systems across the country that are engaging. And our partner here is UC Berkeley. We've been lucky enough to partner. UC Berkeley has some of the best, academic brains on AI. And so we've been engaging in a learning collective where we're bringing in industry experts, we're bringing in academic experts, we're creating a space for these education leaders to really think about what are the implications and ultimately kind of the so what now. What's my roadmap in my district around some of the guardrails I need and some of the possibilities on the teaching and learning side, the operational side, and ultimately, school district leaders live in the steady drumbeat of the school year. And so what does that mean for my kids and my community in the upcoming school year? And so we're bringing those leaders together in September at UC Berkeley with public sector and other experts to really engage on that topic. And they will launch their individual roadmaps on that front. And we see this as sort of cohort one of a set of education leaders that are going to lead this work. And we've done this to this point on Gives and Gets at no cost to the leaders. We want to create this community. We want education leaders to have a safe space. We want them to be able to explore both what the opportunities are and to safely talk about what the risks are here in a way that they're not just out on the skinny branches by themselves. They have a community of peers. They get access to the expertise, and they can hear from experts and can be co-designers in what these solutions look like. So that's the work we're engaged in and continue to launch. And on that front, Frontier State, which is the nonprofit that we're really thrilled and excited to partner with you, JB, on, is that space. We need to create a middle space that allows for these education leaders without the sort of specter of you must buy X or you must transact on Y, to have that safe space nonprofit that brings folks together on this front. And so love for you to share more on the Frontier State front, but that's what this looks like. And I think, based on the interest we've gotten, I think we're just scratching the surface here.
I think you're spot on. I think one of the things that made me so excited, we had our first event together in Dallas last year. Y'all did a phenomenal job leading on it. But if I was to say one thing that made me really excited, obviously the MGT relationships with me go back a ways, and good friends and trusted people. But anytime you're going into that kind of environment and there's any side of professional relationship, like if there's any sort of private sector component, I'm lying if there's not a little piece of me that's like, all right, am I walking into a pitch for something, and the work you and Rodney led in Dallas was truly authentically helping these leaders. I think everything we did that day was giving them questions to ask, not answers. And I think maybe that's the thing that, if I was to sum up kind of like what we want to be at the foundation of this nonprofit work, it's the moment you're giving answers that are tied to business, the entire community's dead. Yep. But the notion that you can't get the trust built between people that work in the private sector and people that work in the public sector around pure mission-driven discovery and questions and art of the possible and actually giving real substance. Yep. I think there's just such a vacuum, and there's some folks doing some great work. The CIO Roundtable was something I got a lot of benefit from when I was on the inside, pretty heavily state CIO, and so a little more policy and like state technology policy. But like, who's bringing together some of the agency heads and chief of staffs and superintendents and CIOs and CISOs around holistically, here's how you should be thinking of these things. Here's the questions you should be asking. Here's some resources and artifacts to actually do it. And so I'm just super excited to be working with y'all on that.
Well, no, right back at you on that front. And I think, you're spot on. We are trying to be user driven here, which is,
that's a great
we did the thing in Dallas and we heard from folks, gosh, we'd love more time to connect. We'd love more opportunity to do that. And so we're really trying to be learners as we build the community on this front, to take what we're hearing from our clients and partners and colleagues on this front to kind of create this space. And I think we're going to continue to learn and discover what that community needs. And our hope is to kind of grow, build a bigger tent, because I think at the end of the day, we need a bigger tent of folks talking about this stuff and figuring out what's possible on this front. And that builds the proof points. That's going to show what's possible on some of the headier things we're talking about today. I think, it's very much possible, but it takes space and time and investment in a way that doesn't feel transactional. And so really hoping that we can continue to build that, and couldn't be more excited to build it with you. So
likewise, brother. I think we'll make sure we put in the show notes how folks that are interested in the kind of cohort 2 and getting in line, because I think with some of the demand, I want to make sure that we give folks an opportunity to join there. So, all right, we're going to land the plane here, Rajeev, with what we call the Roundup. It's kind of a fun little, it's easy. Our folks know you haven't seen these, but we like to just kind of rapid fire to give people, you know, if somebody doesn't realize the experience and intellect of Rajeev at this point, that says more about them after what you just covered. Because I think, gosh, we could do this for hours and maybe round 2 and round 3 one day. But I want them to know Rajeev the person. So if you had one piece of advice that shaped your career, if there's one thing that you go, man, this is the one piece of advice that really shaped me, where'd it come from? What is it, and where'd it come from?
Be a good listener and do hard things. It's come from, you know, my parents. I'm a kid of immigrants. Folks that came here for educational opportunity, and that have benefited a lot from being good listeners and doing hard things and building and growing things. And so I've had lots of wonderful mentors and worked for great leaders, both in the public and private sector, who basically have stamped that point. You know, be a good listener, be curious, and do the hard things.
Do hard things. I love
and that started after not doing great in organic chemistry and trying to figure out what next, and all of the things from my journey. So that's probably the summary there.
All right. If you had one thing you do, and I know you don't get to do this a lot, but if you got to unplug, if you're really trying to get your brain off, if there's certain activities or settings that like you just actually get to shut down, be a husband, be a dad, be in the moment, be a friend, what is like Rajeev's unplug look like?
Couple things. I mean, like millions of Americans, I got the pickleball bug, and my only unique kind of deep cut on this is I play with guys and gals that are 20 years younger than me, and so I run around like a chicken with my head cut off. So it's not just standing there to pass time before the cocktail hour. So it's a good workout. But on the dad front, I'm just coming off coaching my older one in flag football, youth flag football in town, and I gotta say it was real joy to get my son and his 14-year-old buddies to mess around on the football field, and they all wanted the wristband, and then basically the offense was somebody go get open. Was really fun, and especially as your kids get older, wanting them to come hang out with you, or them wanting to hang out with you it was a real joy. So that was good stuff.
That's awesome.
And we had fun with that.
That's awesome. All right, here's one that always gets conversation going. You stay as a guest at my house, a friend's house, whatever it is, and asking the host is not an option. You spend the night, you wake up, it's time to leave. Do you strip the sheets and take them to the laundry room, or do you remake the bed?
Oof. Strip the bed, laundry room.
I love it. That's the only right answer.
I've been trained, Carolyn, my wife has trained me well on.
Remind me where she grew up.
Connecticut, West Hartford, Connecticut.
So what we find, there's an interesting kind of, this question goes different demographics, which is really interesting. But it started, I stayed at a buddy's house in Miami. It was Speaker of the House and good friend, and nobody there. And we were raised in the South. Like, you strip the sheets. And I took the sheets to the laundry room, and his wife came home and was like, what did that guy do in the bed? What kind of weird guy doesn't make the sheets? And it's like, what kind of host doesn't strip the sheets?
Right. Yeah.
But it gets conversation going.
All
right.
Well, absolutely. And my mother-in-law has a great saying that short visits make long friends. So sometimes I'm barely getting out of the bed, and sheets.
I
and
never
shit.
understood why I would remake the bed and make the host strip it. Like that just,
Exactly.
it
You're
just seems
creating
like
more
it.
work.
Correct. It's crazy. You have one book or one band that you think the world doesn't know about that you just really think the world should know about?
It's a good one. I just got this book. It's actually sitting on my desk that a very good friend of mine gave, which is Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, his own story, which is, I mean, I'm just into it and it's phenomenal.
Interesting.
So I don't know how many people.
That qualifies. I didn't know there
Yeah.
was an autobiography.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book.
Autobiography or biography?
It's biography.
But either way.
Biography.
Yeah, either way. That's fascinating. All right, this one's a fun pick'em. You can either choose the wildest thing you've done to close something. Could be getting the date, getting the business. Like, what is the thing where you were just like in the pickle of like, I don't know how to get to yes here. Or your hottest, most controversial take that you don't think should be hot or controversial at all.
I have gotten on to close business, I've literally gotten on a red eye after being on a call and whatever, I don't know, 4:30 or 5 o'clock West Coast time, gotten on a red eye to be there the next morning. And this included some international travel to land the plane, to launch the project, to act into making it happen, and to just move forward. And I think I did that, before any paper was signed or whatever it was. It was just, had to do it. And, literally launch the kickoff meeting, the next morning.
I love that because people see the CEO title or they see the role, the status, the pay, and they want that, but they don't want what it takes to get there. And they don't want the 4:30 red eye.
Yeah, it was,
love that.
yeah.
Do you have a hot take you want to throw at us?
Oh, I'm trying to, I grew up in California and spent a bunch of time on the East Coast and then have come back to California. We in California don't really have great pizza. But I think I am now, I don't know if this is because I've now adopted my home state again, but like the pineapple on pizza thing is fantastic.
I knew I liked you. I promise. I don't. So Jay and Paige and we did a company retreat a month or so ago, and we're sitting at a pizza shop, Village of West Greenville, and somehow this comes up, and we can't understand why pineapple on pizza is a debate. Like, you don't have to like it, but nobody debates like, are you exiled if you put mushroom on pizza? But somehow if you put pineapple on pizza, you're exiled.
I mean, I don't get it. And then you add jalapenos to that mix.
Yeah,
we got some good flavor. I mean, it's pretty fantastic, actually. I mean,
I'm actually in the camp that I work pineapple into just about every pizza. But like, I don't judge somebody who wants like ham on their pizza or veggie on their. Somehow pineapple is the one topping that is nuclear.
I don't understand. It's a little bit like more cowbell,
It's
just like more cowbell.
It's well done. All right, we're gonna land here. Actually, I want to be sensitive on time.
Yeah.
If you had a walk-up song, like if you have a walk-up song, because I do want to make sure I get to the last one, because the last one's a really fun one. If you had a walk-up song, MGT plays it when you walk into the office. You get to pick it.
I don't know. I feel like this would change week over week for me, but I'm in a little bit of the Zeppelin When the Levee Breaks moment right now, just in sort of how I'm feeling. So that probably would be, just that the intro of that song is pretty phenomenal. So
love it. All right. Here's our signature. Every guest gets to leave a question for the next guest and they don't know who they are. The guest that's following you is very likely going to be a big part of the AI convening. We're coordinating scheduling. I think that's next. She's a rock star, so I'm excited that you get to leave a question for somebody that, in a lot of ways, she's brilliant, she's awesome. But the question that was left for you first.
Yeah.
You get to brief the President of the United States, and you get the opportunity, and this is any president, anytime. This is not a political thing. It was explicitly left by John Rogers that let's drown out all the capital P, lowercase p. This is, you get to brief the president whoever you think that president is kind of today, but like with the powers of the presidency, you get to either ask one question or make one comment on the state of affairs in America right now. What do you say? What do you ask, and why?
Do I ask or what do I say?
I'll give you both if you want.
Um, um,
It's agnostic of like what party's in play and right? Like,
yeah. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about this right now, and this will tip my hand on where I see the world. But it would be a little bit. Let's not lose our humanity and who we are. Like, let's the why we need to be cruel and losing a little bit of who we are is not American, and it pains me as someone who's a kid immigrant and has benefited so much from this unique experiment. Like, let's dial down the cruelty and the lack of humanity.
I think you just referenced beautifully what you were talking about in education, even with choice earlier, that we can do the right thing and maintain dignity. Like, we can be a rule of law and we can embrace the right outcomes.
Yes.
But we can also see the dignity.
Exactly.
And kind of bifurcate between maybe some really bad dudes. Like, I don't want the cartel here. Also, not everybody's the cartel. And so we can keep rule of law. We can do the right thing and maintain dignity. And I think we'll find a lot more consensus if we both believe in do the right thing as much as we believe in dignity of every life.
Amen. And human dignity.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A lot of the things we create are man-made on this front. There is basic human dignity.
Yeah.
Regardless of what you believe in life. So,
Bastiat, if my favorite read of all time, my book that everybody should know, Bastiat, The Law, but he boils down, he's a French philosopher at the time of the Revolution, the French Revolution, and he basically boils down and he says, man or humanity is three things. It's their personhood, it's their property, and it's their freedom. And too many legislators of all sides engage in what is called legalized plunder, and they fail to see the person, the property, and the freedoms of that human life. And I think it's one of the best essays ever written. So you get to leave a question. Anything.
Wow. I think my question would be, how do you think about leading in this moment? Like, how do you think about leadership and a responsibility to others in this moment? I feel like it's been on my mind about and broadly defined, how do you lead? How do you show up? How do you lead in this moment? Like,
I love it.
And take it in, whatever grain size and whatever altitude. I feel like it's, I'm thinking about it a lot because, we all live in organizations, we all live in communities, we have our families. How to lead in this moment is very much on my mind.
I'm not at all shocked by that, because having gotten to know you, you take that mantle and that responsibility on behalf of your team that recognizes there's a difference between leadership and management, or hierarchy and collaboration. So I wasn't sure where you would go with your question, but having heard your question or the answer to that, not at all surprised as I've gotten to know you and become friends with you. So Rajeev, I know we're up against time and we want to get you to your obligations. Man, I can't thank you enough. I had a genuinely good time. I got smarter today. I got humbled a little bit today. I think there's a lot in here for folks on all sides of the ecosystem. We'll make sure in the show notes that people know how to get in touch with you and or the AI convening and give folks some of that stuff. But man, just thank you, because you didn't have to do this, and you made me better. I have a feeling you're gonna make a lot of people better that got to listen to you today.
Oh, thank you. This is a real treat, and appreciate all you're doing, and look forward to making stuff happen. Let's go change the world.
Love it. All right, brother. Be
Good
good.
to see you. Stay well. Bye.